Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Monday, August 29th here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to start this morning with domestic politics, and Korea's National Assembly is set to begin its 100-day regular session this week. The nation's three major political parties go into the session with their own problems and different circumstances. Some remain divided internally, while others seem in rather good shape for next year's presidential election. Our Oh Jung-hee starts us off.
In the ruling Saenuri Party, there are few signs of unity. The party's leadership has been dominated by those allied with President Park Geun-hye's inner circle, but members on the outside want to push forward their own visions. Some of those outsiders are holding discussions or working with former progressives, while others have established their own think tanks or are planning to start their new parties. With little common ground between the pro-Park faction and the others, some experts predict those not allied with the president may ultimately leave the conservative-leaning party, ensuring that Saenuri will lose the presidency. On the other hand, the main opposition Minju Party of Korea has drawn most of its new leadership from those close to former party leader Moon Jae-in. At its national convention Saturday, members of the Minju Party picked five-term lawmaker Choo Mi-ae as their new chief and elected 8 new Supreme Council members, 6 of whom are considered pro-Moon. Party watchers are speculating whether that dominance by his supporters will help the likely presidential candidate Moon in the run-up to next year's contest, as unity could help the party achieve stability, but could also lead to criticism that it's too dependent on a certain faction. Meanwhile, the former leader of the minor opposition People's Party, An Cheol-soo, has expressed his firm intention to run for president. In a press conference on Sunday, An pledged to dedicate all his efforts to changing Korean politics and the people's lives. He portrayed the election as a choice between the two extremes on one side and rational innovative strength on the other. An argued that the country's current tasks require a change of administration, mentioning social inequality, a problem he said has intensified over the past 4 years. With the three major parties in distinctly different situations, the 20th National Assembly will begin its first 100-day regular session on Thursday. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea is doubling down on its security cooperation with the United States. The allies hope to more effectively deal with North Korean threats and find ways to pressure Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear and missile programs. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
South Korea is increasing its cooperation with the international community to pressure the North Korean regime to denuclearize. South Korea and the U.S. have agreed to share intelligence on the waters above the northern limit line in the West and East Seas to effectively deal with provocations involving North Korean submarines. In an exclusive interview with Seoul-based broadcasting system KBS, South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se said there will be a 2+2 meeting in October between the South Korean and U.S. ministers of foreign affairs and defense. The fourth such meeting in 2 years is scheduled to be held in the U.S. Minister Yoon added that South Korea is seeking various ways in cooperation with its allies and the UN Security Council members to convince North Korea that its pain and suffering will only increase if it continues to develop nuclear weapons and missiles. Yoon said international pressure on the North seems to be having an effect, pointing to the recent defection of a top North Korean diplomat in London and the unprecedented number of other high-ranking regime officials who have fled their posts this year. Yoon added there's a high possibility of a bilateral summit between South Korea and China on the sidelines of a G20 summit next week for the two sides to lay out their differences on the formation of a collective response to the North Korea issue. Seoul and Beijing have differed recently on Seoul's plans to deploy the Terminal High Altitude Defense, or THAAD system from the U.S., in which China sees it as a way to spy on its territory. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea has hit back at the UN Security Council for condemning its latest test firing of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Pyongyang's foreign ministry threatened to take, quote, action steps in retaliation for the press statement, which was drafted by the United States and supported by the regime's main ally, China. North Korea accused Washington and what it called its followers on the Security Council of threatening its dignity and right to exist by criticizing its nuclear program. Pyongyang also claimed it has the ability to turn U.S. forces in the Pacific into ashes. Now, in what was quite a surprise move, South Korea and Japan agreed over the weekend to start discussions on resuming the two countries' currency swap deal. Responding to critics who said it was a sudden and complete reversal of policy, Seoul's Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho said on Sunday the swap had, in fact, been consistently touched upon by both sides over a prolonged period. He added that the decision to take it up was made in view of the need to secure another safety net in the face of a possible US rate hike. Earlier, Seoul also agreed to extend a currency swap deal with Beijing worth around $57.4 billion, which was scheduled to expire next year. Now, the 8th Korea-China-Japan Culture Ministers meeting came to an end on Sunday. During the two-day event, officials reviewed past achievements and discussed projects to further deepen their cultural ties. From Jeju Island, here's our Iji-won.
Incorporating culture in sports events such as the upcoming Olympics hosted by the three countries to further promote the values and messages of the East Asian region. This was one of the main goals discussed by Korea's Culture Minister Kim Jong-deok and his Chinese and Japanese counterparts at the 8th Korea, China and Japan Culture Ministers meeting on Sunday. On the second and final day of the meeting, the ministers discussed an array of business the three countries have been working on or need to work on to further strengthen cultural ties while promoting each of the countries' cultures and traditions. Other than cooperating on the upcoming Olympics, the leaders also mentioned sharing research on cultural heritage and expanding people-to-people exchanges, which not only develop culture-related industries, but also help alleviate the youth unemployment issue the three countries share. The three leaders also signed the 2016 Jeju Declaration, highlighting the specifics of cultural projects the countries will work on and affirming their commitment to do so. Before wrapping up, the culture leaders also announced what they called 3 East Asian cultural cities for 2017, Korea's Daegu, China's Changsha, and Japan's Kyoto, which will focus on facilitating cultural exchanges with one another throughout the year. Through the two-day meeting, the culture leaders were able to take stock of their past achievements and promised to continue their cultural cooperation until their next meeting in Japan in 2017. 이지원, Arirang News, Jeju.
The Turkish military has launched airstrikes on northern Syria, currently occupied by Kurdish militia, resulting in over 40 deaths as of now. The AFP news agency reports that Turkish forces also suffered their first fatality since it started the military operation 5 days ago, when one of its tanks was hit by a rocket. Turkey first sent tanks across the border last Wednesday as part of an operation against the Islamic State group, as well as Kurdish-led forces, including the PYD and YPG. According to the UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the majority of Kurdish casualties were identified as civilians, but Turkish media says the losses were confined to, quote, Kurdish terrorists. Watchers say action against Kurdish forces in Syria puts Turkey at odds with the US, which supports the Kurds, seeing them as the most reliable allies in the fight against the Islamic State group in Syria. The prosecutor probing the aftermath of last week's earthquake in central Italy says shoddy renovations in breach of regulations are probably partly to blame, at least, for the large number of deaths there. 3 old towns collapsed when the 6.2 magnitude quake struck on Wednesday, killing almost 300 people. Most structures in the affected area have no anti-seismic protection at all. The prosecutor says property owners who commissioned poor quality work could be held responsible for contributing to the quake's deadly impact. The Italian president and the prime minister attended a state funeral on Saturday for some of the people killed in the quake. Now, so far this year, people in Korea have spent a daily average of $1.8 billion on their credit, debit or prepaid cards. According to data compiled by the Bank of Korea, this marks a 12% rise from last year and a record high for the first half. A closer look reveals a more than 11% spike for credit cards and 15% for debit cards. Now, this trend is accelerating, driven by the convenience of it over cash. Going back to 2015, card spending rose by 9% compared to the year before. Korea has started a new service designed to take some of the uncertainty out of trips through airport security. According to the nation's Transport Ministry, the Korea Transportation Safety Authority's website now lists around 400 items subject to regulations specifying whether they're completely banned on planes and under what conditions they can be brought on board. Now, users simply type in the name of an item, for example, knife, and the website will list more than 30 types of blades and an easy-to-read guide on the restrictions on each one. The service is available in both Korean and English. The ministry plans to have the website address sent to passengers along with flight reservation text messages and emails. Korea's Institute for Basic Science has been acknowledged by world-renowned science journal Nature for its research accomplishments. The recognition is great news for an institute that continues to pump out high-quality journals on a variety of topics. Kim Mo-kyun has more.
Nature has included Korea's Institute for Basic Science, or IBS, in its 2016 Rising Star supplement, which was published on Thursday. It also listed the company on the roster of the world's 25 emergent players to watch. Nature has been tracking the research of more than 8,000 global institutions. This year, IBS ranked 11th on the Rising Star supplement, which is a list of the top 100 most improved institutions during the past 4 years. Nature said that the average grade of journals submitted by IBS has increased dramatically by more than 4,000% since 2012. IBS President Kim Do-chul said that the strong performance of IBS is recognition that their research has global relevance and that it is playing a key role in Korea's transformation, especially in the basic sciences.
The establishment of IBS is very meaningful in the sense that we can now research new areas that we weren't able to look into before.
IBS was established in late 2011 as Korea's first dedicated basic science research institute. The institute plans to expand the number of operating centers from 26 to 50 by 2021 and further develop itself as an international research institution. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Monday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We will be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next scheduled bulletin is coming up at 10 a.m. Korea time. We do hope your week gets off to a great start. Until next time, goodbye.